Welcome to the Love and Guts podcast, Andrea.
Yay, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And for those that may not be familiar with who you are, I'd love to just read your bio. I know lots of people don't like sitting through it, but we're going to do it anyways. So people get a little bit of an idea. So today's guest, as we know, is Andrea Macbeth, a trailblazer in the world of microbiome therapeutics and the founder and CEO of Thaena. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Beautiful. A company pioneering human derived postbiotic solutions to support gut and whole body health. Andrea holds a bachelor's in biochemistry with a focus on molecular biology from the University of San Diego and earned her doctorate in naturopathic medicine from the National University of Natural Medicine. Her early clinical work focused on functional GI disorders and autoimmunity, and she went on to launch one of the first stool banks for fecal microbiota transplantation to treat C. diff infections. She served as president of Gastro A&P and as adjunct faculty at NUNM, where she developed and taught graduate courses on the microbiome's role in nutrition. Passionate about bringing science and real-world healing, Andrea invented Thaena, the first human-derived postbiotic supplement, and now leads the charge at Thaena to bring safe, scalable microbiome-based treatments to the world. So I'm so excited to get into Thaena, but also to talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is more around regenerative health and the microbiome.
Yeah, I loved your questions. I'm so excited. Microbiome is my passion. So
I know it
I'm
is. I know it is. Can you tell us a little bit? Actually, let's start there. Can you tell us a little bit how you got into natural medicine, is particularly in this field of developing Thana?
yeah, I think I was a scientist kind of from high school, I don't know, chemistry, summer internship on, and was really always in a microscope, molecular tissue culture type lab. And I left a PhD to become a naturopath in part because I had a personal experience with my sister was diagnosed with cancer when I was doing sort of cancer drug development type research. She's been in remission and is doing well, but that experience left me wanting better tools, and some other personal, just that trajectory of appreciating there's so much we don't know and can do with nutrition and lifestyle.
Mm.
And I became a naturopath really because I didn't want to end up in a hospital again with somebody I loved, or me personally, right?
Yeah.
And I believe and still do that nutrition, kind of can be at the crux of that, along with all of our other tools. And then missed science and loved the mechanism that the microbiome offered to all the cool things that I love about nutrition. And so it was that bridge between my two worlds. Um, and so while I was a naturopath, I was still kind of curious and interested about the microbiome and mechanism. And it just happened to be at that period of time where we were doing lots of microbiome research as a collective scientific community. And it was sort of a perfect storm. I got lucky enough to be involved with another naturopath, Mark Davis, who was doing fecal transplant, and worked with him, and then started our own kind of spin off of that. And it started looking at the postbiotics, or the sterilized component of fecal transplant. So I love the microbiome. I think it's a great way for us to frame why what we eat and drink and think matters. And
Yeah.
I'd love to get into it with you.
Me too. And then at the end, I'd just love to hear more about Thana and the products that you put out there. That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. How would you define regenerative health in the context of human biology?
Yeah, I love that you pose the question that way because I'm passionate about regenerative farming and permaculture, and I'm actually in a camper on a farm and doing a tour and working remotely. And I
Amazing.
think our future of health is very much macro and micro, right? And on a micro level, I think of our microbiome as like the canary in the coal mine of our health and wellness. It's how we evolve in real time to the environment around us. And it's both our most adaptive and powerful tool to the stressors of the world around us. And
Mm.
it's the most susceptible and the most delicate ecosystem to the world that we live in. And so in a similar way that we have a macro level climate crisis and mass extinction event, that's
Yeah.
also happening on a micro level within our gut. And I had not framed it as regenerative farming in the way I think on a macro level when I think about microbiome restoration, but that's absolutely what it is. It's our most important organ system that we didn't know existed. It's the crucial reservoir of nutrients and vitamins that we don't even know about that we need. And it's our first line of defense and adaptation to the stressors of the world. It's the only reason we're like able to live in this world currently. Think about how much has changed over the last 150 years. And it's incredible that we're still able to like get up and
Yeah.
function. And I think it's because our microbiome is that adaptive. Um, Microbes reproduce in 36 hours and swap genes and are so nimble in adapting to the environment, and we've been co-evolving with them since the beginning of time. And so they're the ultra original regenerative farming of the world around us to supply the nutrients and gut brain gut metabolic gut immune precursors that we need to develop and survive the world around us.
Mm. Which is why it's so powerful, knowing what's under the hood through investigation like gut microbiome testing, like shotgun metagenomics, because you can, like you said, it's so adaptive, and its capacity to adapt uh, can be so influenced with what we consume and what we're exposed to. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just such important information, I think, to have if you want to make a change in your health. So, how central is the microbiome to the regenerative process? We've already spoken about that. So, I'm going to move on to the next one, though. What are some of the key ways the microbiome contributes to repair and renewal in the body, whether it's in the gut lining, immune system, or even mood regulation? And you've spoken a little bit about that immune defense, but can we dive into some of these a little bit more?
Yeah, and I think, for context, we've been able to look at the human body, and although we didn't understand the brain or the heart or the lungs completely, we've been looking at them for thousands of years. The gut microbiome, and in particular, the ability to see through sequencing the microbes that are there and observe their behavior the window is only opened a couple decades ago. 2006 is when the Human Microbiome Project came out of the Human Genome Project. And so I like to think that the microbiome can explain everything. That's like the joke
Not
is
not biased at all, no.
we could have a podcast and we could just basically
Yeah, yeah.
pick what you want about human physiology and say, we were originally an archaea and a bacteria that like endosymbiosed and been co-evolving since then. Bacteria are the powerhouse of our cell in the form of mitochondria, right? So mitochondria are just bacteria that got endosymbiosed and evolved. And so I think, the big answer is everything. And then we'll kind of talk about what we do know, right? So
Mm.
what we have learned is that we know very little, and we're continuing to learn more and more every day. But the microbes in our gut make molecules that it's essentially functions as a hormone. If we think about hormones, right? Small molecules that impact every system in our body, and we're just at the tip of the iceberg of appreciating that we have neuronal cells that stick into the gut lining, and the bacterial metabolites will stimulate certain parts of our brain and neurodevelopment. We have immune cells that are educated, or what they become is largely mediated by the microbial signaling we get from our gut microbiome. Our metabolic uh, maturation in the way that we convert calories and our blood sugar response is mediated by the microbiome. And I think what's happened with Ozempic and GLP-1 agonists is a good representation of just how much the microbiome GLP-1 is made by our gut lining cells, mediated by microbial signaling originally, right before it was synthesized. And they're different because the drug version lasts for 6 days, and the gut microbiome normal version is just like hours. But it's a representation of the power that our gut microbiome has on our metabolic state as well. And so I'm most interested in the gut-brain interface. I think that's one that is very impactful. The gut immune interface is really important. And then um, I think the metabolic piece is also really important in liver too. But what we see and what I'm most interested in terms of helping patients on a day-to-day basis is the gut brain and the gut immune interface.
Mhm. And are you actively, being a scientist, are you actively involved in the research or any of the research at the moment?
Well, I mean, I wish we could do, yes, we have basic preclinical work. I have collaborators, and we just published a research paper on the role of oxidative stress in dysbiosis of the gut. And I think, that's a really interesting area of us evolving our understanding of what leaky gut and dysbiosis is from the perspective of the metabolic state of the microbes in the gut. And I'm really interested in that because it correlates with preclinical data we have in C. elegans and looking at the gene expression of these little worms when we put Thaena on them. And then we have clinical, tracking and research that we're obviously constantly trying to look at. Um, if I had an entire university of postdocs to give research projects to on this, I would.
Yeah.
But the space more broadly is evolving really rapidly, and I've been excited to see in the last 5 or 6 years more work on appreciating that it's about what the bugs make, these postbiotic or bacterial
Yes.
metabolites. Um, but like I said, I mean, imagine we just discovered this organ. Like we are so in the infancy
We are. It's
of
wild,
what
isn't
we
it?
think we know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm passionate about the research and I do read a lot
Yeah, of
every
course.
day.
Yeah. So are there particular microbial species or metabolites that stand out for their regenerative potential?
So I think we should define what you mean by regenerative versus what I think about as like homeostasis. And so there is how our stem cells mature. That's a component of regeneration, right? Like I could say, healthy resilience to stressors is a component of regeneration. Making sure that the cells that should die and complete that apoptotic life cycle is part of regeneration. And then making sure the things that we need downstream happen, is also part of like vitality and homeostasis. And so
Mhm.
is that fair? Is that kind of in
Yes,
line with what you're
absolutely.
thinking?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So I would say one of the things I'm most excited about is defining what is health because we just don't have a good definition yet of what a healthy microbiome is. The collective research space spent the last couple of decades looking at sequencing related to taxonomy or the name of the bugs. And what we're just starting to do now is appreciate that bugs can be named things, but that's not a direct reflection of their enzymatic potential or what they're metabolically capable of doing in the context of each person's individual ecosystem, which is highly divergent and
Mhm.
unique to our own microbiomes. And so we are trying to look at my, scientists and the people I work with are trying to look at homeostasis and health as defined by anaerobic metabolism of these fiber rich, kind of healthy bacteria that make things like butyrate and short chain fatty acids. That's a component of this. And an oxidative stress environment that isn't out of balance so that the metabolism is slower and in this non-oxygenated sort of extremophile environment in the colon. And that is where we make these sort of housekeeping basic postbiotics like short chain fatty acids and bile acids and tryptophan derivatives that we're starting to learn keep us healthy and out of inflammation cycles and out of neurodegenerative cycles and out of anxiety and depression and autoimmune disease and all these like chronic diseases. Um, the bugs that matter or the mechanism through which we think of the bugs that are going to be doing this are the ones, again, that I mentioned are a balance of the ecosystem needs of the guilds to make these postbiotics. And what I mean by that is it's complicated. Like you can have
Mm.
a different keystone species in different environments that can still be contributing to making the right mixture of butyrate, for example. But we do see that in the oxidative stress model, at least, the Bacteroidetes and, you know, I'm hesitant to give you names because it's context dependent.
Yeah.
But when you get a Prevotella bloom or you get facultative anaerobes that, you know, you can start to put them into categories related to their type of metabolism, where you get not good guys and bad guys, but kind of just the wrong people making the wrong things at the wrong time, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it totally does.
It's a
Yeah.
very
It's
complicated way of saying
no,
I
it's
don't want
so
to give you an answer.
nuanced. Yeah, it's so nuanced, isn't it? Because I think we're, like you said, we're still learning. We're in the infancy. Things that we would have thought was a representation of a healthy uh, ecosystem when it's in excess may not be. You know what I mean? Versus just being in at a, like say for example, maybe Akkermansia if it's elevated, or blastocystis in the previous life, we kind of thought that we just need to kill them off.
Right.
But we see that in a healthy ecosystem.
Right.
And even
And
like,
there's subspecies. Like some of the blastocystis are good if they're
yes,
behaving, and some are bad. Similar to E. coli, similar to Clostridias,
Prevotella is an interesting one too, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's so nuanced. Um, yeah, it is. But I guess, that question, if anything, if it did anything at all, is just to highlight how nuanced it is and how we are still learning about what that healthy ecosystem looks like. And is there a healthy ideal that, it's all in context to the person and the representation.
I think we do know diversity is important. We
Yes.
see really clear, discrete, kind of conclusive data, if you will, as much as you can get conclusive in the microbiome, that we have a lack of diversity, and diversity, lower diversity, at least in the colon, not necessarily in other microbiomes, is correlated with disease across all of them, basically.
Mm.
And when you don't have a healthy ecosystem to make those basic nutrients, I think of a clear-cut forest, you just aren't as resilient to perturbation, whatever that may be, stress, preservatives, antibiotics, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the only source of truth we have beyond now starting to look at metabolism and what the bugs are doing, because the more taxonomy that's happened, there's very few overt pathogens. C. diff can make a toxin that's overtly bad, but it can also be a totally respectable member of the community,
Yeah.
when kept in check and not at a density that creates toxin by quorum sensing. And so I think the paradigm we've had of good guys and bad guys is fundamentally flawed. And so we have to start to think about contextualizing bacteria and fungus and phage behavior. And then what does that environmentally create downstream to
Yeah.
define unhealth versus or dysbiosis versus, balance.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. God, there's so many questions. Where do I go? Where do I go? Um, what can we learn from nature's ecosystems, forests,
Yeah. Oh my
rivers,
gosh. Love
oceans?
that.
Yeah, that we can apply
That's
to our
one of my
ecosystem.
favorites.
Oh God, I'm glad. Glad I chose that one then.
Well, because like I've been going to microbiome conferences for a long time, right? And it's fun because it's a little bit of a way for me to contextualize the naturopathic, modalities, but also the best people, the best lectures, the most informational, kind of hard-hitting information is from the ecologists, always, in my
Interesting.
opinion,
Mm.
because they approach microbiome science in the way we approach macroecology in ecosystems. And that is what we have to do here. Because again, we're talking about an order of magnitude of diversity of creatures again, even creatures we haven't identified yet. There's so much unknown dark matter.
Yeah.
We don't even like appreciate what diversity looked like before westernization, really. I mean, there was a paper published last week about the Yanomami and their skin microbiome, and they have like a completely different layer of skin microbiome that you lose as soon as you take a shower.
Oh, wow.
And it's like all these species, hundreds of species that we didn't even know existed until they did this sequencing, and the same thing's true in our gut too. So I think that the principles of macroecology are fundamentally the best way for us to frame the gut microbiome, because you can say things like, okay, what environmentally does health look like in a Sahara desert or a rainforest or a coral reef? And those can all be different species, but there is universal truths about diversity being important in healthy ecology, and having keystone species and identifying their role in these guilds. Um, the wolves of Yellowstone were reintroduced and changed the way they flowed. Um, and the same thing's true in our gut. I apologize if I'm breaking up a little bit, but I'll keep
No,
going
you
and you
came
can
back.
stop
It's
me.
good. Satellites.
Um, and I think in our gut, the same principles are true. You have to keep the nutrients, the prebiotics are so important because that's the precursor nutrients of the ecosystem.
Oh, cut out for a moment.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I've just put you back on again. You said prebiotics. We the satellite took over,
Prebiotics.
and
Yeah, sorry. Speaking of ecosystems and being able to be anywhere in the world, but like here with
we're
you at the
working
same
with it.
time. Um, Prebiotics are the nutrients, the plants that we eat are the things that feed that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so I think, anyways, that's a long answer about ecology being all of the rules of ecology apply here,
Mm.
not least of which we still have things to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, from your perspective, what daily habits or exposures are the most nourishing to our microbiome and its regenerative power? I think I love this question because sometimes I feel like we need to scale it back so people feel empowered with what they can do on a daily basis. And it's not just down to what we consume supplementally or dietary, there are other exposures as well that are important.
Yeah, and I think like the agency of individual choices is why I love the microbiome, because climate science is really depressing.
Oh, yeah.
But I have a lot of control once I understand these basic ecology principles about what I choose to do and how I filter that information. And so it is what we eat and drink and think, and our air quality and our water quality and our food quality and our nervous system patterning. So much of the vagus nerve is, I mean, the vagus nerve is the person that's the composer of all of this complex orchestra that's happening. And so sleep and meditation may be more valuable than certain components of nutrition, but nutrition is also kind of the precursor of the food.
Yeah.
So all of those things do matter, and you can cost benefit. For me, food is easier to do because I have the
Totally.
privilege to pay for really, good quality chia seeds and yogurt and good produce. Sleep and stress management is a lot harder for
Yes,
me.
I agree.
So I think everybody, similar to having a unique ecosystem, has a unique puzzle to put together of how to nurture and cultivate this regenerative forest, if you will, um, to limit its, and sometimes that is a supplement, and sometimes it's just fermented foods. Sometimes it's just meditation.
So for you personally, what sort of daily habits I know I'm with you when it comes to sleep and stress, and having two kids under 5, like I feel sleep, um, even it can be such a challenge. But also when I get it, when I have the time, someone miraculously goes off to sleep earlier, it's my time where no one needs me. And so I disrupt the sleep myself by just doing mindless stuff because I'm like, this is my time finally. So I agree with you. Nutrition and supplementation feels a lot easier for me at this point in my life. And I'm sure lots of people would be feeling the same. So when it comes to, say, dietary or maybe not supplemental, unless you want to talk about the postbiotics here, because it's so nuanced supplements, people need different things, and up to you what you want to discuss when it comes to what daily things are almost a non-negotiable for you to nourish your microbiome, or that's in the back of your mind. This is going to be supportive for my microbiome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I do contextualize it in like, where am I going to take a hit that I can't avoid? And where am I going to be replenishing that I have a choice about, right? And good quality water, filtered, non, as much as it stinks, chlorinated water is problematic for a microbiome. You can let it evaporate, but like,
Tell us about that
well, like,
if
it's a
you want
slippery
to.
slope, right? Like, I don't want to be out here telling people to not chlorinate their water drinking systems, but like, let your water sit out and evaporate so that the chlorine doesn't kill your microbes. There's really good work that was done by Martin Blazer. He wrote a book called Missing Microbes. I was like, there's three
Oh
of them in my
yes.
mind.
Yeah.
And he talks about when chlorine's introduced, how that impacts gut microbiomes. Because chlorine kills things. That's the point of
Yes.
having it in drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think about that. I think about plastics. We are learning about PFAS, but we've always known, microwaving plastics and plastic water bottles disrupt glyphosate and Roundup. So I'm thinking about like the negative things I get to avoid, right? That I have choice of. Air quality, if I can manage purifiers and things like that. Because those are big hits, right? Even if it's
Yes.
it's like every day I'm drinking lots and lots of water. Every day I'm breathing lots and lots of air. So good water and good air is great. And then I love food and I love farming and I love nature. And so for me, cooking and thinking about fiber and fermented foods is a joy. And one of the places I have a lot of control and power over to make huge beneficial contributions. My roommates joke that, you know, they are shocked I'm able to consume as much fiber as I do. And I was like, well, if you know about them as much about the microbiome as I do, it's like protein's important, but so is fiber.
Yeah.
Let's like switch the protein phenomenon to a
Yes.
fiber phenomenon and see what happens.
Yeah.
But slowly and incrementally, because sometimes if you have a low diversity and you increase fiber, it makes you worse. So I can
Yes.
do chia seeds and lots of vegetables and beans, and I love that. And then there's the flip side of all the things I don't have control over that I have to just let go, or that I don't have emotional bandwidth to do, which is not be stressed out, not be the
Yeah.
CEO of a startup. you know? So, and sometimes I do need to, like, I don't really drink alcohol and I don't eat ultra processed foods, but like sometimes community is more important and I do eat a pizza and drink a beer. And
Absolutely.
in those contexts, it's really important for me to have the freedom to make that choice and have that agency. And no, it's not the end of the world. And there's other things I can do, to mitigate, like take super healthy people's poop pills to kind of
Yeah.
offset that.
Risk versus benefit. I think, that emotional aspect and the social aspect is so important, isn't it? So if we're consuming and being exposed to what we would say is, more microbiome nourishing things for the most part, those moments that we do take out to just socialize and enjoy the pizza and enjoy the wine or whatever it might be, it probably even much more enjoyable because it's not a daily occurrence. So yeah, I'm
And
all.
our psychology, I mean, I don't know. There's some days where I'm like, man, do we all just need trauma therapy? Is that the
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah.
Is
Oh
it our
yeah.
amygdala?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny when you're in this space, you kind of just don't look at the fact that, hey, my lower back hurts. It's like, why, what emotionally is going on for me as well, that this lower back is just not getting better? So
I
it's,
know.
you can't kind of ignore, I think, well, I often don't want to ignore the emotional aspect to ill health sometimes, not sometimes, all the time. So what are some, I'm sure we've spoken a lot about, actually, we've spoken a little bit about this as well, the most common lifestyle or environmental disruptors that compromise microbiome, diversity and function, actually. Can we speak
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah. When we think about, again, it's like there's too many things. We can't avoid everything, right? So it's all
Yes.
about relative risk and where your biggest hits are coming from. And what we do know is microwaving plastic's really bad. Um, Glyphosate has, you know, detrimental impacts on how the shikimite pathway is. So the fascinating thing about herbicides and pesticides is they're designed to kill microbes, right?
Mm,
And so in the context of our gut, they shut down basic processes. They might not be overtly toxic to us, but the shikimite pathway is how we convert tryptophan into tryptophan derivatives that we're finding are central to our brain health. And so if
yes.
you block the shikimite pathway and all your microbes, who are the guild that's responsible for making that nutrient, the downstream effects of that make logical sense. And so there's definitely environmental things that we're exposed to that we don't have control over. But when you think about antibiotics in processed meats, like our largest bolus of antibiotics is not from taking an antibiotic when we're sick, it's from industrial meat. And
Mm,
so, I I eat meat, but very, very
conscious.
pickily,
Yeah, yeah,
consciously,
yeah, yeah.
because it just doesn't make sense to like take that hit of antibiotics unless I really need it, like when I had pneumonia earlier this year. Um, Drinking water and air quality, because that, even though those things we're exposed to in those contexts are relatively low level, it's the dose, right? It's the amount of water and air that we have to consume. So, those are things I think about. The other thing that's, I think, going to be a new, I hope we have bandwidth to talk about is emulsifiers and the way that our
Mm.
mucus layer integrity is so central to human
Can you name
health.
some? So those that
Well,
may not
yeah,
be
so
familiar with emulsifiers.
oh man, there's two with like more chemical-y names that there's an article about common emulsifiers in um ice cream and milk products, and I can't think of
Polysorbate
the.
80?
Yes,
Yes.
that's it. And then, carragenin's not in that
Yes.
study, but it's in that kind of. So the point of emulsifiers and preservatives writ large in processed food is to change the normal way food works so that they can be shelf stable. And emulsifiers make it so that they destabilize and in the same way that they go in and destabilize our mucus layer. Now, is eating some ice cream, Breyer's ice cream at night once a month gonna be the thing that gets you? Maybe, maybe not. But like if you're having, nut milk every day with your coffee that has an
Mm.
emulsifier in it,
Which
I'm
is
I'm
quite common,
concerned.
which many people would be doing.
Yeah, and then you're like, but also this is the environmental medicine part where you're like, I just gotta make like I avoid plastic lined paper stuff when I can.
Yes.
And you know, that's because in order to make paper not fall apart, you have to line it with like some pretty heavy duty chemicals. Is that worse than the like the nut milk thing is one of those things where I'm like, I've gone back to just drinking whole, like really fancy milk because I can do that and I can choose that and that is a privilege. But like nut milk is not healthier for you if
Yes.
it's got an emulsifier and it comes in a plastic lined box and you're doing it every day. If you do it once in a while, sometimes I get a coffee to go that's hot that I can't not get in a paper cup. But honestly, I choose to have my coffees that I buy out if I don't have my own container, as cold, because heating plastic is worse than cold plastic.
Mm,
And so it's stuff like that where it's like, okay, I can make a decision. I recognize that there's a
yes.
risk here, but there is a level of agency to understanding how plastics and preservatives work so that I know what I'm doing and why, and I can make relative risk decisions. And I think that's really important, and why I love the microbiome, because in so many other contexts, we just don't have control.
Yes. No,
And,
I love
you
what
know,
you're bringing forth, you're putting forth, because I think a lot of people would be questioning some decisions that they're doing on the daily, and
just don't microwave plastic. Like
yeah.
that's my thing, that I don't heat plastic. If you can
Oh,
do
I
other
even
things,
think about people putting plastic in dishwashing in the
yeah,
dishwasher. I'm like,
it
oh,
destabilizes it.
yeah, yeah.
And like, we aren't taught that. I don't know. It just is
Of
one of those
course
things where
not.
there's good data that shows that is one of our biggest hits. So that's something I try to do consciously.
Yeah. No, thanks for filling us in on what you do. I think it's very powerful.
I do
So,
drink LaCroix sometimes. I know
LaCroix.
that like soda water.
Oh,
Oh, it's an American bubble water. Like I drink things
right.
in cans sometimes.
Yeah,
You know, fake sugar, really bad. Aspartame, really bad.
yeah.
There's lots of things that are bad. And so I'd rather smoke a cigarette than drink a soda.
That's a powerful. That's going to be my little the clickbait. I'd rather smoke a cigarette than drink soda. Love it.
I mean, I don't know. I know cigarettes are bad for me, but I also like really enjoy them because when I was young, I didn't know better. I don't
Yeah.
know.
God, I shudder at what I did when I
Once,
was younger.
I know, once in like a blue moon, I'll just
Thank
do
God for
that.
our adaptive nature. Our bodies.
Exactly.
Um, so, do you think that the traditional health model focuses too much on killing pathogens, for example, antibiotics and
Oh yeah.
even cleansers, and not enough on nurturing regeneration? Because I'm sure lots of people out there, right? I'm going to be on a detox or da 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 da. What are your thoughts around those things, being the expert in the microbiome field?
I think we have to understand why, right? So germ theory and Koch's postulate in the 1900s understanding of disease came from the discovery that you could cause a disease by transferring a microbe. And then the assumption in the hygiene hypothesis that came from that is that microbes equal disease. But it was just like 50 of them or 30 of them, right? And then there's like trillions of other microbes that aren't overtly pathogen, like, aren't cholera.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that the medical model came out of Koch's postulate and germ theory. And it's a really hard thing to unlearn because we were taught bad thing, you kill the bad thing and you get better. That's how antibiotics work. But that doesn't appreciate the nuance of the ecology and the ecologic model. But it is something that people understand and are still kind of rooted in. And so that's how medicine is done. Do I think everybody needs a candida cleanse or a parasite cleanse or whatever XYZ cleanse? No. Do I think they sometimes help people? Not because they're killing the thing that we think they're killing, but because they're modulating the system and maybe creating an environment for some of the good guys to come back or some of the bad guys to die down a little bit, probably. But I think you could get there with a lot less collateral damage
Yeah.
through ecosystem regeneration. And if you look at the data of fermented foods and prebiotics, in particular polyphenols, I expect we will see a big shift from traditional cleanses towards.
Nope, we've lost you to the satellite again. This is real time, peeps.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. I'm going to put you on again.
dang. Okay. So I left off with, I think we'll see a future where cleanses get replaced by like very restorative polyphenol, clean polyphenol. So like blueberries and berries that are not covered in herbicides and pesticides, which is tricky. Like
Mm,
the most terrifying thing is like finding out that kale gives you all these, really heavy duty levels of kale gives you tholidium, or whatever. I don't even know if that's the right word. But anyways, long story short, there's nuance and we have to kind of do it. But eventually I think we'll appreciate that giving ourselves a focus on restoring the ecosystem is going to have the same benefit with less of the collateral damage than
Yeah.
these kind of net cleanse. You know, I think antimicrobials, berberine, biocidin, even rifaximin have really a lot of value, but probably part of that is because they're modulating the ecosystem, not just because they're I mean, there's nuance in the way that they're working as antimicrobials. And if you can get people low and slow to reintroduce prebiotics, I think we're going to see better outcomes.
And I like that you say less collateral damage, because I even think about berberine and how it's not selective in what it kills off. And so it's, long-term use of it can be killing off the good guys, for want of a better way of saying it, as well as the ones that we're trying to kill off. And so almost that crowding in with the polyphenols and supporting the terrain helps to sort of reduce some of the guys that we don't necessarily want in overabundance in the gut, or their metabolites that are being produced. So I actually, yeah, I love leaning into that a little bit more than the killing off, you know. So I'd love for you now to talk about Thaena. So how is Thaena approaching this differently with your product philosophy? Tell us actually what products you have for those that may not be familiar. Obviously, I'm going to pop the links in the show notes so people can go and explore Thaena. But can you tell us a little bit about what they are, what products you have, and what's your philosophy around it?
Yeah. So we have one product right now, and it is healthy donor stool. So like fecal transplant, but
Like fecal transplant. This is what I want
but
to
it's
dissect with you. Yeah.
yeah, but it's been killed, autoclaved, sterilized. And so we are taking whole healthy donor stool, and healthy, again, we don't have a great definition, but these are like vaginally born, breastfed, never been chronically ill, less than 5 antibiotics in their lifetime. We are very diligent about their lifestyle and their diet. We are joking someday we'll like make healthy people poop summer camp, but like these are the healthiest people we can find in the US.
Yeah.
Um, we've screened and surveyed thousands of people, and we have 7 of them, 9 actually, as of late. But um, it's their poop that
Yeah.
they ship to us frozen. Um, and we sterilize it and process it. There's some pH adjustment, and we focus on the short chain fatty acids and good postbiotic metabolites. It doesn't have any proteins like pasteurized heat killed probiotics do, and there's nothing alive, so there's no infectious disease risk. So we kind of addressed that component of what made fecal transplant problematic in the regulatory framework. And then we pool it, and we've identified the metabolites. There's tens of thousands of them. I don't know which ones are the actives, but again, it's an ecosystem model. So it's like a super nutrient from the healthiest ecosystems we can find.
Mm.
And what we find is that when people who have this kind of dysbiotic or inflammatory redox, I think about me when I do something stressful and eat pizza and drink beer, it comes in and sort of chills things out. I also was a C-section baby. I have ankylosing spondylitis. I have been on meds my whole life. My microbiome is never going to make some of these nutrients that our donors make, too. So to some extent, it's sort of a replacement multivitamin for me, for my like set.
We lost you to the satellite again. This time I won't pause it because I actually don't know what that does to the video when I do that. So we shall see.
Here.
There we go. We lost you again. That's all right.
Sorry. Where did
Don't be
I
sorry. Don't be
where did I
sorry.
drop off?
You were talking about, for you, it's like a multivitamin, and for others it may be the case too.
Yeah. And what we find is that when people, you know, are out of balance, that's when this really seems to help the most. Um, it really seems to help with motility and constipation, not over like treating the disease, but just helping with motility in
Amazing.
general in some patients, which is really interesting. Some customers. And
Just making a note here from looking down, just so I don't forget. So when would you use FMT versus the postbiotic that you've got? Because it sounds very similar, except like you said, one's kind of live versus not.
well, fecal transplant's an approved drug in the US for C. diff. We are a supplement.
Yeah.
So, like by law in the US, the way the regulatory framework is we're a nutrient to support health. We are working on clinical research to look at motility in particular and constipation. Interestingly, sometimes it can have the like support the inverse when people have um traveler's diarrhea, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Normalizing.
But yeah, normalize it. And it's a good complement to other therapies to help rebuild that ecosystem. It is the multi it's the it similar to how we've been using manure since the beginning of time in farming. This
Mm,
is the manure fertilizer for a healthy gut microbiome ecosystem from the healthiest people we can find. And so we are still learning a lot. We were the first people and the only people so far to autoclave healthy stool. There's some work that's been done in autoclave probiotics. Um, and we're starting to see more about heat killed probiotics in general. There's just a lot we don't know. Um, we made this because fecal transplant had a lot of power, but the limitation of infectious disease. And we brought it to market as a supplement because, again, I feel like most ecosystems need a little bit of support in the US.
yeah. Oh,
Most
here in
people are
Australia as
working at a,
well.
little bit of a deficit because of all those things we talked about that we don't have control over. So it's just another tool in that toolbox of support, I think.
Mhm. And how long has the product been around?
We made it in 2019 and then used it with providers through, um, 2022 through this year. And then we launched direct to consumer in the US in April.
Amazing. And this may seem like a very silly question, but I know that there are some crapshool platforms out there in Europe that you can select which donor.
Yeah,
Are
we
you
don't.
guys like that? No.
No, we pool because the
Yeah.
goal is that every batch has uniformity. And so
Yeah.
we were really strategic in looking at the metabolomics of different donors over time and pooled. And because it's sterile, again, we have the ability to do that, where
Yes.
live is a little bit more you want to track infectious disease risk. So it's different than that.
Yeah. So fascinating. So for someone that's listening who feels depleted, inflamed, or disconnected to their gut, where would you suggest that they start to support their body's regenerative capacity? I'm sure we've kind of laced a few of your own personal suggestions and that throughout, but if you were to leave the listener the starting
I
point.
I would do an ecosystem, assessment and say, okay, where's like the low-hanging fruit for me? Where's my resource capacity? Do I have economic resource and I don't have time resource? Do I have the ability to change where I shop or what I cook? Or am I limited there, but I do have the ability to get a water filter or I have a lot of it. I think everybody has to do their own kind of risk assessment
Mm,
to figure out where the best bang for their buck is
yeah.
because everybody has different priorities. And like for me, independent agency to make decisions, good or bad, is really important to me because like as a kiddo, I was so sick and so limited that as an adult for my psychology, it's more important that I can like make bad choices. Um, and then like recover than it is for me to be really stringent in my diet, for example.
Yeah.
And my goal is pain mitigation, but like I use prednisone if I have a flare, and that's like a cost benefit I'm okay with. I have economic privilege to buy really fancy groceries, but I don't have a lot of time privilege. And so I counteract those two with, and I think everybody can use this as a paradigm to make their own risk assessment from the perspective of what we broadly know about the ecosystem microbiome and like
Mm.
mitigate some of the bad things and support it with as many of the good things. And if you have SIBO and fiber makes you feel terrible, focusing on things that don't make you feel terrible, right? Don't like force yourself to eat a bunch of beans because a podcast said it was good for you.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's right. And that's even down to the fermented foods. People are, like, oh, that just doesn't agree. And again, thanks, body, for giving me those signs and symptoms to investigate further and look into why I may not be tolerating those things. Um, but I love the way that your head thinks and how you're very practical around that, about where people can start and sort of see where it's possible for them. But I did want to actually say before we jump off, are there any sort of concerns that come up for people when it comes to your postbiotics that you want to address? Any myths or anything that people are like, oh, I don't know if I should take that because of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, though that's a good question. I take for granted that I know so much about it, right?
Yeah,
But
deep
people
in it.
are concerned about safety, and it's really, really, really important that I articulate clearly that safety has always been the core root of how we developed this. And every step along the way is to validate and verify the safety of this. And I come from, molecular and did toxicology and stuff. And I worked with a toxicologist who did groundwater safety because I just knew that that would be a good perspective. And I feel really strongly that when she was like, "Wow, this is great. This is like safer and healthier than most drinking water." I was like, that is the sentiment I want people to know, that
Mm.
we are intentional and care a lot about the safety and our science-led driven approach to something that's completely new and novel. I don't think it benefits everybody, but for the people that are missing whatever this is that these healthy ecosystems replace, it does seem to be unique and different than anything else you can get. Because, like, we try to make synthetic human blood, for example, we've not been able to do that because it's just too complex. And the same thing is true of a human microbiome in the form of stool. It's just so much more complex than we know on the basic science level that we can't culture it. It's different than a yogurt culture or fermented food because there's thousands of microbes that can't grow in conventional culturing. So it is really safe and it's very distinctly unique. And the best advice I have is to treat yourself like your own scientist. And if you can get access and you can, you know, try things out when you're in need and can make that cost benefit analysis, this is a really great tool for some people sometimes. But, that's just the reality of like how I approach everything in science. And, I'm hoping we'll know more in the future, but I think everybody has to approach every component of this as their own personal scientist and listen to their body to see if it's the right fit, cost benefit, resource allocation.
Yeah, love it. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before I let you get on with your evening? Evening? Yes.
No, I mean, I appreciate the conversation and I hope people feel empowered in the midst of chaos and uncertainty to own their agency over their own microbiomes. It gives me a lot of grounding to know I have some control after being told by doctors my whole life I was sick and there was nothing I could do. Like the reality is that's so untrue. I
Yes.
have so much power to
Yes.
control and make decisions, and we're in a great era of information equity, and you have to filter, but the information is out there. And so there's no reason people can't feel empowered. I'm very pro people. I mean, you have to filter, but I think it's better to have the information than to not.
Mm.
So I hope if people are looking for the answers that they continue to strive for, you know, knowing we still have a lot to learn.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you jumping on with me and sharing your insight and your personal knowledge around everything and your experience. So thanks so much for joining us today, Andrea. I cannot wait to make this live, and I'm so excited to see where you take Thaena.
Thank you for the platform and opportunity. And I really appreciate it. People talking about love and guts is the core of all the things.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And guys, if you have enjoyed this conversation or you know someone in your life that needs to hear it, please make sure you share this episode with Andrea and myself so that others can fill up on the valuable content that Dr. Andrea Macbeth has presented to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.